Hey there, welcome to my happy place. I've been thinking about shooting a video like this for quite a while, and I would say the two biggest reasons why I wanted to shoot a video like this. Number one, I really like all of the Rockstar rig and gear rundown videos online. I'm fascinated by them, in fact, because I really like seeing how they have things set up, specifically what works for them, maybe what doesn't work for them. They have so much more experience than I do that they have everything totally dialed in down to the tiniest detail. And that stuff is exciting for me because I've always been kind of like a tinkerer with my gear. I'm always trying to improve something or make something more efficient, or maybe just make something work better for me. And sometimes that's as simple as using a tubing cutter to customize the length of a cymbal stand. Or sometimes that's building something from scratch, like my Clickbox 4.0. We'll get into that later. But anyway, I really like seeing what works for these guys, and I like being able to implement new ideas into what I consider to be an ever-evolving thing that I love so much. And then the second reason why I wanted to shoot a video like this, honestly, I've probably been really embarrassed about this for a long time. I've always been weird about my gear. I mean, I don't know, maybe I should use the word particular. I've been particular about my gear. But recently I've just had that thought where I realized, you know, it's okay to be weird. And over the years I've shared my experiences with fellow drummers and some of my students, and I realized that it really is okay to be weird. For me, it's proof that you care about something, and I really care about all of this stuff. And so I thought that maybe by diving into the details, number one, I figured that could help maybe. Maybe that'll help another drummer out there, or another musician in general. I like rig rundown videos if it's a guitar player. Like, I still like seeing how they have things set up. And I also think that part of me digging into the details here, the details, like the super details, to show like what this does and why I do this and why I made that choice. And at the end of the day, it's just, again, it's proof that I care. I love all this stuff. I love this gear. And I wanted to be able to share all those details with you. So anyway, if you're up for it, we're going to get into the details, and we're going to start from the ground up. One thing I started doing a zillion years ago, and I still get funny looks for it, is I tape my carpet. And everybody looks at me weird right up until the point at which they realize it's brilliant, and that's why all the pro bands do it. It allows me to set everything up quickly, mostly in the dark, and it ensures that all of my stuff is exactly where I need it to be. I've also had a few people ask, what does bar mean? Hello, that's where the drinks go. One other thing down here that's really important to me are these. People think that they look like weird lunar landing pad things, but they're actually called KBrakes, and they are sheer genius because they prevent my bass drum from moving. The little teeth on the bottom dig into the carpet, and this thing will not budge. I also have an internal bass drum mic, which is suspended in a Kelly shoe mount, and that is connected to an XLR jack. And I do that for me, because in a live situation, the sound guy is going to put an external microphone in front of my bass drum anyway. So that microphone that's in the bass drum isn't actually technically a bass drum microphone. It's not really for sound. Anyway, it's connected to an XLR jack, and then I use that cable to trigger one of my favorite pieces of gear, and that is my Porter and Davies throne. This thing is fabulous, especially if you're using in-ear monitors, because each time you hit the kick, it vibrates the throne. There's a transducer built into the throne, and you can adjust how sensitive it is and how hard it hits. And for me, being able to feel the bass is actually more important than being able to hear it. So basically, this thing makes rehearsal feel like playing a big show on a big drum riser, which is fantastic. For rehearsal purposes, I also use this small isolation shield in front of my bass drum so that my throne isn't overwhelmed by loud amps or the PA. On stage, during a live situation, that's typically not an issue because amps and PA speakers are basically facing away from me. Another thing located behind my kit is my mixer, which is actually just for rehearsal. I heard somebody say once that your rehearsal spot should feel like a jacuzzi. It should be a dream. Everything should sound perfect. Everything should sound exactly the way you want it to sound. And that comfort level is absolutely one of the things that enables creativity, at least for me. having access to a space like that that allows for full self-expression is really crucial for me. And honestly, that's advice that I really wish I would have taken to heart sooner. I've only had a mixer behind me now for a few years. And so many of those rehearsals in the past were too loud, where too many frequencies were sort of jockeying for position. And, you know, I'd end up hitting harder so that I, you know, could hear myself. And then my hands would tingle, or my ears would ring afterward. And it was just too loud. It was just, it just wasn't working. And that plan isn't sustainable. So having a mixer is really the key for me. On the mixer, you can see that I have an input from that internal kick mic, which I blend into my in-ears or headphones, along with a mic which is mounted on the wall behind me and aimed generally at the kit. I use that as an ambient room mic, which basically picks up the whole room. It's like all those crazy loud rehearsals from the past, but I can control how loud it gets and how well I can hear myself just by turning a few knobs. One thing that I have felt strongly about for a long time is protecting my hearing, which is something that I typically pass along to my students. That probably started back in drumline in high school, or maybe just in all of the loud rock bands that I've been in through the years. I just always wanted to protect my hearing, and I did what everybody does at first. I played drums with earplugs in, and that just didn't work for me because I couldn't hear enough. So that's when I switched to using headphones. I use the Vic Firth headphones, which are fantastic, especially like in writing sessions, because they give me kind of an organic picture of what the room sounds like. But then I also have been using in-ears for live performances. These are a game changer. These are the UE5 Pros with a little ambient port. They're a game changer for me when it comes to performing live, because they isolate what I really need to hear, and they cut out so much of that damaging loudness. And frankly, my favorite part about in-ears is while they're blocking out a lot of that damaging loudness, they give me the opportunity to hear what I need to hear at a reasonable volume. And that's actually the key. Because they block out so much, they're at a very reasonable volume for me to be able to hear everything I need to hear, you know, over a band playing. So they're huge for me. My Ultimate ears are an absolute game changer and a must. And that brings me to another favorite piece of gear. I call this my click box, and this is version 4.0. I've done 4 complete rebuilds of this over the years, hence this is 4.0, and I've incorporated a variety of mixers, iPods, different DI boxes, power conditioners, lights, you name it. This time around, I built this one to feature an iPad, and I use my iPhone as a backup. On the iPad, I use the Tempo app for anything where I need just click, and then I use the SoundQ app for anything where I need to run backing tracks. All of my backing tracks are created with click panned hard left and the tracks panned hard right. And then I have the audio signal split going into the mixer so that I have individual control of both in my ears. Then I send only my right out to this DI box for the sound guy to use in the PA. And then I also have individual control of whatever monitor feed he sends me by plugging it in right here. I also added an adjustable GoPro mount for my drum cam. Sweet. One trick I use on my snare drum is I mark the head with a Sharpie for the perfect cross stick position. Speaking of tricks, here's a couple with my floor tom. I always put about 5 cotton balls in my floor tom. The cotton balls float up when you hit the batter head and then come to rest on the resonant head, which keeps the tone warm and musical without being too out of control or ringy. Another thing I do is I number the legs and the mounts on the bottom head. Since the legs have memory locks, that means my floor tom is the perfect height and angle for me every single time. Another trick that I use isn't a trick at all, but more of a rule of thumb. Musicians, label your stuff. All of it. 95% of the people I've met in the industry are awesome. But in that other 5%, there are certainly some shady, opportunistic thieves. All right, who's ready for some gear? Let's go ahead and shift our attention to the tower of power. At the very top, that's Baby Girl. That's a 6x13" 20-ply vented Orange County snare drum in Platinum Bird's Eye. This is Tank. That is a 6.5 by 14 inch DW Edge snare drum. Ah yes, number 1. First snare drum I ever owned and then refurbished. This is a 1978 Ludwig Phonic. It is 6 by 14. Then we move on to Orpheus. A 6.5 by 14 Black Beauty steel shell made by KBrakes. And then the beloved Electra. 7 by 14 solid copper shell with that gorgeous houndstooth finish. That's also a 7 by 14. This is Trinity. Trinity in the silver glass. That's a 10-ply maple shell. 6.5 by 14 made by KBrakes. The ever beautiful yet temperamental Michonne. That's a 7 by 14 inch solid aluminum shell made by KBrakes with that gorgeous wooden inlays. And then of course he does abide. This is the Dude. The Dude is a 7 by 13 30-ply vented Orange County snare drum in gray satin maple finish. And then of course Thor, the crown jewel, my pride and joy, my favorite snare drum that I've ever played. That is a 7 by 14 solid brass shell that weighs a zillion pounds. And sometimes what Q does is they actually blow a clear coat over the brass, which they did not do on Thor. So it starts to oxidize, and you can see like my knee print, and there's like a face print over here. I love the snare drum more than any other snare drum I've ever played. All right, so I learned another lesson, and so I developed another trick that I wanted to share that I do with all my snare drums. There was a benefit show in Los Angeles where a bunch of famous guest drummers were taking part in this benefit, and one of my friends needed to borrow a couple snare drums. I lent him a couple of mine. Of course, all of us have those same soft-sided black snare drum cases, and so they all tend to look alike, even mine. I mean, I have luggage tags on all of mine with my info, but you know, in a dark club when there's 25 of those things lined up, you know, things can happen. And when I got home and I opened up the case, I realized, uh-oh, this isn't my snare drum. So it turned out that my snare drum took a little road trip to Orange County that night. And me and that drummer were able to get our treasured snare drums back after one simple phone call, because of his trick that now is my trick. When I opened up that case, I noticed that he had a label in a really inconspicuous little spot on the back of his snare drum that had his name and phone number. I called him, he and I met up, we were able to get our property back, and so now all of my snare drums have my name and phone number on a little label on the back of the snare drum. Continuing on drums, this is the kit that I've been playing for years now, and I am still head over heels in love with it. I absolutely love these shells, which are galvanized steel with maple reinforcement hoops. I'll see if I can get a close-up so you can see. So you can see that it's a metal shell in the center, and you can see the maple reinforcement hoops on the edge. And so what that does is it really gives the drums a really warm, like a wooden drum tone, along with the bite of a metal drum. And all the sound guys freak out when they see this, and engineers freak out. They're skeptical, thinking it's going to sound like trash, and then they hear it, and I end up answering questions after the gig. Anyway, that is a 9x12 rack tom. That is a 16 by 16 floor tom. I also have a little 8x10 rack tom in this case right here that I'm going to sneak in, see how the band reacts. And that is a 16 by 22 inch kick drum. And then onto the heads, I really love the clear vintage Emperors on my toms because they're warm and buttery, and they have a ton of bite. They cut through everything, which is really fantastic. a Power Stroke 3 on the kick, which leads me to probably my favorite Remo head of all, which is this. It's the P77 on the snare drum. I love it because it is super durable, but it gives me plenty of snap, crackle, pop, and it really accentuates the throatiness of a 7-inch deep snare drum, which is typically what I prefer to play. So that is absolutely my favorite snare drum head. All right, on to cymbals, which are all Soultone. Unique sounds individually to me, which I love. They each have their own voice, but together as an ensemble, they really do come alive. They really do sound beautiful together. So anyway, these are 14-inch custom brilliant hi-hats. That is an 18-inch custom brilliant RA crash. That's a 10-inch splash. This is a 21-inch extreme ride. What I like about this too is you can see the raw bell and the raw edge with the lathed center. And then this is a 19-inch custom brilliant crash. That is a 10-inch FX05 splash. This is a 20-inch natural prototype. I love this one because no matter how hard I hit it, it just absolutely doesn't go above a certain sort of ceiling. An LP tambourine. And then my 18-inch huge stacker, which was an idea that was inspired by my friends Chris Hornbrook and Dave Elich. I love the big 18-inch stacker, which by the way is an 18-inch heavy hammered china on the top, and then an FXO B6 effect crash on the bottom. Anyway, the reasoning behind this is by using the wing nut, it gives me an opportunity to tighten this thing for really short, almost like a chicky sort of hi-hat kind of a sound, but also if I loosen this thing up, it gives me a very trashy sort of china sound, which I absolutely love. These are the sticks that I've used for as long as I can remember. They're the Vic Firth American Classic 5B model with the wood tip. They're simple, they're perfectly balanced for me, they're durable and they're easy to find. You can seriously buy these anywhere. I also use the Legacy brushes, a couple of different root models, and several of the Vic Firth mallets for cymbal work. My first pedal, I think, was a Ludwig Speed King, and I moved on to a Tama Flexi Flyer after that. But when it came time to buy my first double pedal, I saved all my money for my first set of DW 5000s. I loved them. I probably wore out, I don't know, 2 or 3 of those. And then I remember saving up all of my money again to buy these 9000s, which I absolutely love. I've been lucky enough to form long-lasting relationships with lots of these companies. And to me, that's what endorsement is all about. I've been lucky enough to be added to a few artist rosters over the years, and you know, the thought of free gear went out the window decades ago. I mean, unless you're fortunate enough to be selling millions of copies of something, the free gear thing just doesn't happen. But I always tell people not to let that discourage them, because in my opinion, I think that you form relationships with companies that already make gear that you already love. That's what I've done. I told a close friend of mine that I was going to shoot a video like this, and he encouraged me to include a piece about perseverance. I've never stopped. I continue to love this so much, and drumming didn't come easy to me. And I guess, you know, I could have given up, but I didn't. And I literally owe my college education to the drums. I got a drum scholarship. I'm not the greatest drummer in the world. I never made it big. You know, I don't have a big house on the beach with a Porsche in the garage from this, like I wanted to. But, you know, nothing has changed the fact that drumming still blows my mind. The drums make me smile as much today as they did the very first time I saw drums. And that's what it's about. That's truly what it's about. And I feel really lucky to be here 30 some odd years later, still playing drums. I believe in encouraging other musicians, and I believe in being a positive contributor to the music community and the drumming community specifically that I love so, so much. And through the years, I've been lucky enough to be associated with some incredible people that work for amazing companies who make all of my favorite gear. And I truly consider myself fortunate and lucky. And it means a great deal to me to be able to thank the following people: Ben, Joe, Chuck, and Mark at Vic Firth. That was my first endorsement in 2006. Jeremy, Max, Gravy, Roger, and the whole fam at Q Drums. Tomer, Icky, and Laura at Soultone Cymbals. Jasmine and the whole team at Ultimate Ears. Brian and Bob at Remo. Wes at KBrakes. Dill, Tim, and Rachel at Porter and Davies. Mover and the whole family over at Drumhead Magazine. Jules and Garrison at DW, and Joey at Pearl. You guys have all been amazing to me. And so has my family and my loved ones for being there and supporting me through this whole crazy ride, which is not over yet. And thanks to you too for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope it helped. Hope you liked it. See ya.